My name is Adam Foster, I'm 35 years old, and I live in Savannah, Georgia, a place where word travels faster than the tide. Until a few months ago, I thought my family and I had finally reached some middle ground. But that illusion broke in a single phone call. I was halfway through lunch at my office when my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. On the other end, a calm, professional voice said, "Mr. Foster, this is Lara, your brother's event planner. I just wanted to confirm that your family has withdrawn your invitation to the wedding." I froze mid-bite. "They what?" "Yes," she continued softly. "But they still plan to keep the $70,000 deposit you made for the event." I leaned back in my chair. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. "Cancel the entire event," I said. She hesitated. "Sir, you're not the groom." "No," I replied, "but I own the venue, the catering company, and the hotel they booked." There was silence on the line, the kind of silence that lets the truth sink in. Before I tell you my complete story, subscribe and comment where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story travels. That single moment flipped the entire balance of power. For years, I'd built something out of nothing. I started with one rented hall that I swept myself after every party, one secondhand van, and a small catering team that sometimes couldn't afford to take weekends off. Now, after 15 years, I owned a string of event venues, a luxury boutique hotel near the river, and a catering company that handled some of the biggest weddings in the state. Everything I had, every polished floor, every chandelier, came from sheer work and long nights. My younger brother, Ethan Foster, is 34. He's always been the golden boy, charming, favored, and endlessly excused. My father, Robert, lives for appearances, and my mother, Cynthia, is the queen of public warmth but private coldness. I learned early that in my family, love had conditions. Ethan could stumble and they'd call it character growth. I'd succeed and they'd call it luck. When Ethan got engaged to Madeline Grant, my parents acted like royalty. Her family had money, not billionaire wealth, but the kind that got their names printed on gala invitations. To my parents, that was better than gold. At the engagement party, I felt like a guest, not a brother. Ethan basked in attention while I shook hands with strangers who didn't remember my name. Still, when they began planning the wedding, I made an offer. Not for credit, but out of goodwill. My hotel, my largest event hall, and full catering. At market price, it would have been over $100,000. I charged them $70,000, just enough to cover labor and supplies. My parents' reaction? Not gratitude. Just a stiff, "It's good you're stepping up for the family, Adam." Stepping up, their polite way of saying, "It's expected." Over the next few months, I noticed something strange. My name wasn't on the seating charts. At dinners, they discussed the wedding as if I were a sponsor, not a guest. Ethan started calling me the behind-the-scenes guy. It stung, but I told myself not to take it personally. After all, this was for family, right? A week before the call, we had dinner at my parents' house. Ethan said, "It's so important to have only the right people there for the ceremony." He didn't look at me when he said it. I should have realized then. But I didn't. That call from Lara changed everything. When I hung up, I sat frozen at my desk, staring at my phone. The sunlight through my office window suddenly felt sharp, almost mocking. I'd spent nights checking menus, tasting dishes, ensuring every room met 5-star standards, and now they were excluding me from the very event I'd built for them. My anger wasn't loud. It was cold, calm, and deep. I picked up the phone and dialed my mother. She answered in her usual cheerful tone, the one she used when pretending everything was fine. "Adam, I was just talking to your father. Why am I not invited to Ethan's wedding?" I cut in. There was a long pause. "We just thought it would be better to keep things simple," she said. "You and your brother have your differences, and this is his day. It's better without unnecessary tension." "For who?" I asked quietly. "For everyone," she replied. "Then return the $70,000, I said. "You canceled my invitation, so cancel the deal." Her tone hardened. "That money's already committed to the wedding, Adam. You offered, remember?" "I offered because I thought I was family," I said, "not your unpaid event sponsor." Her voice cooled. "You're making this about you again. This isn't about money. It's about Ethan's happiness." And then she hung up. 10 minutes later, I got a text from Ethan. "Don't make a scene. It's better this way." I stared at it for a long time. Better this way. Those words would stick with me for the rest of the week. That night, I walked into my hotel office and found Travis, my manager, going over bookings. "You hear anything about the Foster Grant wedding?" I asked. He nodded. "They finalized everything last week, 70 rooms, the bridal suite, full catering menu. Looks like a big one." I smiled faintly. "Yeah. Big. But in my head, I was already drafting a plan. When I got home, I laid out every contract on my kitchen table: the hotel, the venue, the catering. I reread each one slowly, highlighting every clause about breach of agreement. My family had signed each document under my business name, not my personal one. They weren't just relatives now, they were clients. Clients who had violated the terms. I thought about letting it slide. But then I pictured that ballroom filled with laughter, my food, my staff, my hotel, and my absence. No. Not this time. The next morning, I called Lara back. "Cancel the wedding," I said. "Excuse me?" "Cancel everything under the foster grant booking. They breached the agreement." She went silent. Then, quietly, "Understood, Mr. Foster." I hung up and called Travis next. "Block the dates. Mark the reservation as cancelled by management. No refunds. If anyone calls, tell them to speak directly with me." His reply was simple. "Got it." By noon, the gears were turning. One phone call had begun to unravel months of preparation. The first message came from my father. "Adam, what is going on? Lara says the wedding is cancelled." Then one from Ethan. "What did you do?" I didn't respond. Not yet. I wanted the silence to speak first. Because this wasn't about anger anymore. It was about boundaries. By the next morning, my decision was more than emotion, it was a plan. I woke up early, made coffee, and walked straight into my office. The same contracts I had studied the night before were still spread out across the desk, edges slightly curled under the weight of my coffee mug. Each one said the same thing: if a client violates terms, the event can be cancelled immediately, with no refunds. It wasn't personal anymore. It was business. At 8 sharp, I called Lara, the event planner, again. She picked up instantly, probably expecting an update. "Mr. Foster, I wasn't sure if I should reach out after yesterday," she said. "Cancel the foster grant wedding," I repeated calmly. She hesitated, the way people do when they're processing a decision that might start an avalanche. "You're certain?" she asked quietly. "That's a massive event." "I'm certain. They broke the agreement. I don't let my companies be used by people who think I'm disposable." Lara exhaled. "Understood. I'll handle the vendor notices before the end of business." After that, I called Travis at the hotel. "Block off all the foster bookings," I said. "Mark them as cancelled by management. No refunds." He didn't ask a single question. "Done. Want me to direct all calls to you?" "Yes. I'll handle them." Next, I called Allison, my head chef. "Allison, the foster grant wedding is off. Don't prep anything for those dates. Reassign the staff to other events." She blinked. "Seriously?" "Seriously." She nodded once. "Understood." By noon, the cancellations were already in motion. Vendors started calling my office to confirm. My receptionist handled them with professional calm. "Yes, the event is cancelled at the client's breach of contract. Mr. Foster will handle all future communication." Word spreads fast in the hospitality business. Within hours, whispers were moving through Charleston's event scene. By the time my phone buzzed again, I already knew who it would be. My father. He didn't waste a second on greetings. "Adam, what in God's name are you doing? The hotel says the wedding's cancelled. The venue says it's cancelled. Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Yes," I said simply. "I stopped my businesses from being used by people who decided I wasn't family." "This isn't how family acts," he barked. "No," I replied, "but neither is uninviting your son while keeping his $70,000. There was a long silence. Then, his tone sharpened. "Your mother is furious. Ethan's furious. You're making this personal." "It is personal," I said. "But it's also business. You don't get to take what I've built and erase me in the same breath." He hung up. 20 minutes later, my phone lit up again. "Ethan." "What the hell, Adam," he said. "Do you have any idea how hard it is to rebook everything? 200 guests, gone. People already have flights, rooms, plans." Maddie's in tears. "You should have thought about that before uninviting me," I said calmly. "You're being childish." "No. Childish is expecting to take my money, my time, and my work, and still pretend I don't exist." "Do you realize how this looks?" he snapped. "You've humiliated the whole family." "They did that themselves," I said. "They just didn't expect anyone to call them on it." He tried one last time, softer now. "This is going to ruin relationships, Adam." "They ruined them," I replied. "I'm just done pretending we still have one." When I hung up, the quiet in my office felt heavy but freeing. For the first time, I wasn't the one apologizing. That afternoon, the storm really began. At 3 p.m., my assistant buzzed the intercom. "Mr. Foster," she said carefully, "Charles Grant is here to see you." I knew the name immediately. Madeline's father. I straightened my tie, nodded to my assistant, and said, "Send him in." He walked in with the kind of composure money teaches, silver hair, flawless navy suit, watch that cost more than my first van. His smile was polite, but his eyes were sharp. "Mr. Foster," he began smoothly, "I think we can agree emotions are high right now. My daughter's wedding means a great deal to both families. If you reverse your decision, I'm prepared to offer an additional incentive." I leaned back in my chair. "You're offering me money to ignore how your future in-laws just erased me?" He clasped his hands. "I'm offering you a chance to fix this before it becomes something ugly." I smiled faintly. "This isn't about money, Mr. Grant. It's about respect. And you stood there while they cut me out of the event I built." His jaw tightened. "You're making a mistake. People will remember this." "Good," I said. "Then they'll also remember why." He left without shaking my hand. By the time the sun set that evening, the cancellations were complete. The ballroom was off the books, the hotel rooms were freed, the catering schedule cleared. Months of planning, undone in one day, not out of spite, but because I finally decided to stop being the silent foundation they stood on. That night, as I locked up, I looked around my office, the place I had built brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice. For once, I didn't feel guilty for protecting it. The next morning, my phone was chaos. Dozens of missed calls. Voicemails from my parents, my brother, even Madeline's family. My inbox flooded with subject lines like, "Urgent, wedding cancellation." I didn't open a single one. By mid-morning, the first fallout arrived. Travis called from the hotel front desk. Adam, a bunch of guests are here early. They're demanding their rooms. Word hasn't spread yet." "Tell them to call Ethan," I said. "Already did. He's not answering." "Then tell them management canceled the event. That's all they need to know." He hesitated. "It's about to get loud down here." "Let it," I said. "Because sometimes, silence isn't peace, it's just the calm before a well-deserved storm." By the time noon hit, the situation was boiling over. My assistant came to my door, pale. "Mr. Foster," she said quietly, "your father's downstairs. He says it's urgent." I nodded. "Send him in." A minute later, Robert Foster walked into my office like he still owned every room he entered. His shoulders were stiff, his expression carved from frustration. He didn't sit. He just stood there, staring. "This has gone too far," he said finally. "Do you understand the embarrassment this has caused? The Grants are furious. The guests are calling. You've humiliated your own family." I kept my voice even. "No, Dad. You all did that when you cut me out of the wedding but kept my money." He shook his head, almost laughing. "You could have handled this privately. You could have stayed home and let it be." "You mean, let you keep $70,000 of my work and pretend I don't exist?" His tone snapped like a whip. "You've destroyed your relationship with your brother, for what? Pride?" "For self-respect," I said simply. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. For the first time in my life, he had no speech ready. He turned sharply and walked out without another word. When the door closed, the quiet felt enormous. For years, I'd fought to earn that man's approval. In one conversation, I realized I didn't need it anymore. Less than an hour later, Ethan called again. "You've ruined everything," he said flatly. "We had to call 200 guests today. Maddie's parents are furious. Everyone's blaming me." "As they should," I said. "You uninvited your own brother." "You don't get it," he snapped. "This makes you look terrible. No one's going to side with you." "I'm not looking for sides," I said. "I'm looking for fairness. You wanted me gone? Fine. But my businesses go with me." He was silent for a long beat. Then, "You're pathetic." "Maybe," I said. "But at least I'm free." The line went dead. That afternoon, my phone rang again, but this time, it wasn't a family member. It was Aunt Diane, my mother's older sister. She'd always avoided the family's power plays. "Adam," she said gently, "I heard what happened. I just want you to know I understand. You've been treated like a prop for years. Maybe now they'll finally see it." Her words hit harder than she probably realized. For the first time, someone in the family said out loud what I'd felt all my life. Later that evening, my office door opened again. It was Lara, the event planner. She looked tired, folder in hand. "I just came from a meeting with the Grants," she said. "It's chaos. They tried to rebook the event somewhere else, but every major venue is full. They'll have to push it back at least 6 months." She set a stack of papers on my desk. "These are your copies of all the cancellations. Everything's finalized." I nodded. "Thank you for moving fast." She hesitated at the door. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing. Most people would have just eaten the loss to keep peace. But they crossed a line." After she left, I sat back in my chair, the room dim except for the desk lamp. The weight that had been on my chest for weeks was gone. For the first time, I wasn't living by my family's definition of peace, where silence meant obedience. That night, one last call came in. Charles Grant, Madeline's father. His voice was clipped, the politeness gone. "I want you to know this isn't over. You've made enemies you didn't need to make. People remember things like this." "I hope they do," I said quietly. "And I hope they remember why." He hung up without another word. I leaned back, the city lights flickering through the blinds. I knew there'd be gossip, whispers, maybe even damage to my name in their little circles. But the truth? I didn't care. I'd spent my life keeping quiet so others could stay comfortable. That ended today. Because sometimes doing the right thing means being willing to let the wrong people talk. The next morning, the story was everywhere, whispers in hotel lobbies, murmurs at coffee shops. Some people shook their heads. Others smiled knowingly. By then, I had stopped checking my phone altogether. The silence was peaceful this time. Travis poked his head into my office around noon. "You see the schedule?" he said with a grin. "The open weekend from the cancelled wedding? Booked already. Corporate conference, full price." I smiled. "Good. Let's give that ballroom a better story." Business was fine. Better than fine. And for the first time in years, so was I. The days after the cancellation were strange. Quiet, but not empty, the kind of quiet that follows a storm when the air finally feels clean again. My phone still buzzed occasionally, but I stopped picking it up. The calls were all from the same people who had ignored me until now. I didn't owe them my time anymore. 2 days later, an email arrived from my mother. No greeting. No warmth. Just a single paragraph. "We are deeply disappointed in how you handled this. You've hurt this family more than you know." That was it. No mention of what they had done. No acknowledgement of what they took. Just blame, neat, packaged, and familiar. I read it once, then deleted it. It didn't sting the way it used to. Ethan didn't call again. A cousin told me he and Madeline had flown to Florida to get away from the stress. Her parents were telling everyone the wedding was postponed because of vendor issues. No one mentioned that the vendor was me, the groom's brother. For a while, I stayed silent. I didn't defend myself. I didn't post explanations or talk to relatives. Let them write whatever story they needed to save face. Because the people who mattered already knew the truth. A few days later, my Aunt Diane stopped by the office again. She carried a bag of cookies and that calm, no-nonsense look she was known for. "Your father's not angry because of the wedding," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "He's angry because you took away his control. That's what this is really about." She was right. For years, I'd mistaken keeping peace for keeping love. I believed swallowing pride was the same as being the bigger person. But peace built on silence isn't peace, it's surrender. My staff understood it better than anyone. Allison, my head chef, came to me one morning and said, "If they can't respect you as family, they don't deserve you as a client." Travis told me, "That cancellation opened dates we rebooked within hours. You didn't lose anything. You just stopped giving it away." He was right. Financially, I hadn't lost a cent emotionally, I'd gained something far more valuable, clarity. 2 weeks later, an envelope arrived at my office. The handwriting was neat and unfamiliar. Inside was a handwritten note from Lara, the event planner. "You stood your ground. Most people wouldn't. You reminded me why I love this business, not for the parties, but for the people who refuse to be stepped on." There was a $50 gift card to my favorite coffee shop tucked inside. It wasn't the gift that mattered, it was being seen. For once, someone understood me not as a businessman, not as a son trying to prove his worth, but as a person who finally said, "Enough." A few months passed. Word around Savannah was that Ethan and Madeline had rescheduled their wedding for the next year, at a vineyard 2 hours away. No discounts, no special deals, no family help. And my name never came up again. That was fine. Because the real victory wasn't that I canceled their wedding. The real victory was that I'd stopped letting them define my worth. One evening, I sat on my back porch with a glass of bourbon. The air was warm, the sun dipping low behind the oaks. I thought about all those years I'd spent fighting for a seat at a table that was never mine. And for the first time, I realized I didn't need that seat anymore. Sometimes, the only way to earn respect is to walk away from the people who keep taking it. I didn't ruin my brother's wedding. I didn't humiliate my parents. I just refused to let them use me anymore. If that made them uncomfortable, maybe it was time they sat with that feeling. Family can be your greatest strength, but it can also be your weakness, if you keep letting it strip away your self-worth. That's what I learned that week. And that lesson was worth far more than any deposit, any event, or any approval I'd ever chased. Now, when people ask about my family, I don't hesitate. I just say, We're not close. And that's enough. Because the people who stand beside me now, my team, my friends, the people who see my value, they're not here out of obligation. They're here because they want to be. I didn't lose a family that day. I simply walked away from the illusion of one. And in its place, I built something real, my own table, surrounded by people who know exactly what it took to earn a seat there. If you've ever had to choose between keeping peace and keeping your dignity, choose yourself. Because sometimes walking away isn't about anger. It's about freedom. If this story hit home for you, give it a like, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tell me in the comments what you would have done in my place. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. Because some kinds of revenge don't need noise. They just need silence and strength.